Hey,
Hello.
hello,
Hello.
troops. Well done. Another incredible week. We thought we should get together and talk about some of the seismic
Well, I
changes
think so. I
that
think
have been
this is.
happening.
I think this is. I know. You've often said, "Oh, this is it. This is it. This is it." I now think in the UK, this is it. I think this is this. The tide, the wave is broken. I think. I
Yes,
think.
I've noticed a few people. Sorry, Helen, go on.
No. I think this is it. I think we are now what we are witnessing is the first lot of the second wave of people who are now prepared to speak out. And
Right.
I think it was Andy who was saying on the Canad Noir who was saying this is how things go very 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 slowly and then very quickly.
Yes.
And I think this is it. I think suddenly ours is the default position.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I think
Now
that's
that
right.
it looks it's safe for people to take it on, that there are enough mainstream people who aren't sort of renegades or mavericks, but just middle of the road types of people saying, yes, I put myself on that side. All these other people who didn't want to position themselves as the forerunners of this, they just wanted to sort of stay in the comfortable middle. That comfortable middle is available to them now. We're seeing just overwhelmed. I mean, I'm always watching the skeptical movement and the atheist movement because they
Yeah.
should have been on this so quickly, and for some reason it's taken them forever to catch up. But they seem to have pretty much fully caught up now. Richard Dawkins is really starting to not just speak out about gender identity ideology, but to sort of take a lead in taking on this issue. He's interviewed Helen Joyce. He's been tweeting about it. That kind of thing is very heartening.
He shared the Declaration of Women's Rights petition today.
But
So
it is
he's
interesting, isn't it?
Wow.
It is interesting. I mean, I am really obviously overjoyed that everyone's come to join us. But where have they been? Where's he been? I mean, but where the hell have these people been, man?
Well, can I talk a little bit about that? Because I think there's one thing I've noticed over the last few days, a number of competing kind of arguments, and Liam Hennessy there in the comments is saying stuff like this, which I think is absolutely true. And I think that yes, we are not at the beginning of the end; we're at the end of the beginning, or something like that. We are at a very kind of we're at a new stage. But I've noticed people saying things like, "Oh, don't forgive Labour too easily" and stuff like that. I haven't forgiven Labour at all,
No.
But I do think what the good sign is that they're obviously responding to polling,
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
I mean,
it's not so much that Labour politicians are doing this; it's the fact that they're forced to. The fact that they're being forced to, and that's good news.
I think this is very clear, Graham. And I feel the same. Like people have been saying to me, "Oh my God, I can't believe that you're trusting Labour again." I don't trust Labour at all. I just want to put that out there. But
Yes.
it doesn't. But it doesn't matter. What matters is that they've had to cede ground. They've had to row back. This is a huge deal. That's a massive deal. They've had to. We have forced them to do this. This is a huge win. This is Labour, who has been so long on the side of, no, of course, women can have a penis. Of course they are, you bigot. And they've had to respond to polling. This is massive. And this is exactly what this is how parties should work. It's a democracy. They've seen what people want, what people think, and they've had to respond to it.
I party platforms are supposed to represent ideological viewpoints too. So the fact that Labour refused to acknowledge that self-ID was bad, that pediatric transition was bad, that men and women's spaces are bad, was positioning those views as ideologically not permissible to progressive people. So the fact that Labour has had to adopt them is really showing to people that you're allowed to believe, to be opposing self-ID while considering yourself an ally to gay people and to women's rights and, on the side of progress, so to speak. Because a lot of people just, honestly, I think day by day, people not seeing those positions being held by progressive political parties, not seeing those positions being reflected in the media and progressive media outlets like The Guardian, was telling them that they weren't allowed to hold those views, even if they actually logically thought that those were the ones that made sense. They didn't feel like they could fit them into their.
Remember, up until now, these positions, this basic position that we have held, has been pushed as the position of the far right. That can't be said anymore. And all
huge.
of these things
it's
are
massive, because that is the number one argument, is that we're on the right, and now it's the Labour.
They can't
position.
say that. Now it's this is the Labour Party's position. Women's spaces. Is women having single-sex spaces is absolutely the default Labour position.
I can tell you how big that is for Canada. From my work in LGBT Alliance Canada, reaching out to politicians and trying to explain to them that this isn't a far-right position, that we aren't right-wing Christian conservatives, to be able to say the UK's Labour Party is in line with our position. That is just a massive, in our elevator pitch, it's going to be the first thing out of my mouth from moving forward to any politician, and in the US too. This is really going to break everything wide open.
And there's also something else I wanted to say, because somebody has brought up Ghislaine in the chat has said that they've said safe spaces, not single sex. I think one of the really other important things that is happening now is that the conversation can be had. We can push and push and push. Now we can talk about this. People, that's it. Pandora's box is open, or the genie is. You can't put it back in. Now that's all that's happened here with Labour. Like, I don't trust them at all. Like, they've got to. Starmer has to reach out to Rosie Duffield and say, we're talking to her because she has, she knows a lot about this. She can give us some advice. He has to mention her before anyone can begin to trust him. But right now, that's not the point. The point is that the dam has broken and we can talk about
shift.
It.
Yes. Yeah. It's a good shift. I wonder also. It's pretty soon. I think it was actually just earlier this week, just like 2 or 3 days ago, that Chloe did the detransitioners chat to Senate. Was it the Senate she was speaking to?
It was.
And I think that, I know it's too soon for, obviously Labour have had this in the barrel for a while, but that footage is so moving and so upsetting. And the Democrats look so stupid. The Democrats looked detransitioners in the eye who'd had breasts cut off and had been sterilized in their teens and told them that it wasn't happening. They looked ridiculous. And I think that one of the problems that we have at the moment is that I think basically American politics are too much of an issue over here. For instance, if you look at the kind of the attitude towards equity and racial matters as well, it's all just borrowed from what's going on in America. You know what I mean? It's like you've seen, and you see it in the posters of trans activists, things like armed trans people. As I always say, with what, cricket bats? Super sticker. Thank you. That's very kind of you.
That's incredible. Thank you so much. I have to say that footage was phenomenal. I've seen so much in this, and yet even I actually sort of welled up, and it's one of the first times I've sort of teared up through watching or reading something for a really long time. I've become so sort of inured to it, but it was perfectly positioned, wasn't it? The sort of perfect mix of emotion and anger and sort of speaking from the heart. She was really incredible. And true. Everything she was saying is absolutely true. She's not doing this. She's not doing this because she's got some hidden agenda. This is the agenda.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very apparent agenda, But that's what we've been fighting for the last 5 years, is people saying that we're actually not saying what we're saying. We're saying something else, something mysterious and nasty and bigoted, But
that goes to the heart washing thing. The idea that, if what we're saying, if their brains can't argue against what we're saying, but their hearts tell us that we're on the wrong team, then their hearts will tell their brains, well, it's just a trick. You can't listen to what they're saying. There's a secret underlying thing that you just won't know about, because otherwise they have no excuse. They have no excuse not to cross the aisle and come to align themselves with our viewpoint. But their hearts say, you're the wrong tribe, you're the wrong team. We can't allow you to do that. Oh, wow. The donations are coming in today. Wow.
That's phenomenal. So thank you so much. It's incredible. That's and there's another, and Jane A there as well.
And that's thank you, Jane. That's crazy.
Thank you so much.
That's crazy. But Lynn, maybe we had better do some of these at the end of the show rather than
yes. But also there's the IPSO guidelines as well. I mean, that was massive. Did you see that?
Yes.
Was it just related to Susie Green's child, or was it more than that?
No. Susie Green's child was a particular case where she tried to sue, I think it was the Times, for misgendering her son, and she lost. But aside from that, on top of that, IPSO released new guidelines, and they said something like, it was something like you can stick to preferred pronouns unless it actively misleads the reader. And I think that is so important, because that will mean we won't see any more headlines like woman rapes too.
We might do, but what can happen now? But what can happen now is that people can complain, because up until now the IPSO guidelines have been I mean, it was like somebody in one of our chats brought it up, that the resources at the end of the 2015 IPSO guidelines, the resources were all about Trans Media Watch, Stonewall, Gendered Intelligence, Gender Identity Research and Education, FTM London, Mermaids, Press for Change, and Scottish Transgender Alliance. That was 9 resources that were all trans activists. And in this guideline, none of them.
They're gone. They're gone. That may be the biggest thing, actually, of all of this.
It's all big. And it's all at the same time.
Yes.
Twitter, IPSO, the Labour Party, everything is falling. Everything is paving the way for us to be able to talk. And just talking is it, because once, Operation Let Them Talk, Let Us Talk has happened, it's, that's it, it's done. Like, if we can talk and we can just make the reasoned arguments to everyone that we have been doing for years and years and years, but in a tiny corner where no one was allowed to hear us. That's it.
Yeah. So a couple of people are saying this, so I should give voice to it. It always activates. Yes, you're right. Sorry. Sometimes you forget. So, fair enough. Fair point. But yeah, it's and like, I think that IPSO's removal of those voices is like, look how easy it is. You just don't include them. You don't speak to them. You don't let them influence you. And I'm hoping that kind of attitude permeates more institutions.
Yes. Well, we're starting to see that we're living in a world where it's like astrology and astronomy are battling for dominance, or science and Scientology, and everybody just trusted that all these trans activist organizations had this sort of scientific upper hand, were like legitimate and credible. And now people are waking up that no, these are activists with a very specific ideological agenda that isn't necessarily in alignment with reality. That this isn't like gay rights organizations could more or less be trusted to advance proper views on gay rights and how to integrate gay rights into society. We're not seeing that with trans activist organizations. They're pushing pseudoscience. They're pushing extremist ideology. And we're starting to see that. The fact that IPSO has taken all the trans activist organizations out of their resources is saying that those organizations are not mainstream. That's astrology, not astronomy kind of thing. And we're seeing that with WPATH becoming more and more marginalized on the European mainland, with more scientific bodies saying WPATH is not science. WPATH is pseudoscience. WPATH is not real medicine. WPATH is fake medicine, alternative medicine. So that's really important that sort of message comes out, because again, in the work I do, people who are politicians and educators, they want scientific resources, and they're being fed bad science from trans activist organizations, and it's hard to combat that because there are just so many trans activist organizations. Now I can go to these people and say, okay, you're being fed all this stuff by all these trans activist organizations, but look what's happening in Europe. These trans activist organizations are being recognized as not credible and being taken out of official resources. So that's going to start happening here too.
It's true. Really, and now, of course, the real hard work begins. I mean, like the real hard work continues, but it's different hard work, because now what we have to do is get all of these captured institutions to roll back everything that they have rolled in with trans activism. It's still, we've got years of work ahead, but I absolutely finally feel that this week the tide has turned. There's no question. And now, in the words of what was it, Andy Dufresne in the Shawshank Redemption, now I'm going to write 2 letters a week. When he gets his library, he writes a letter every week, and then he gets the library, and they say, "Okay, what are you going to do now?" And he's like, "Now I'm going to write 2 letters a week."
Oh, that's brilliant.
That's everything. So now there's no resting on our laurels. There's a lot of work to do, but finally we have got the winds of change behind us.
Let's talk a little bit about what's that phrase we always use for overinvestment in the idea? What's that phrase? Yeah, sunk costs.
Sunk costs.
Let's talk about sunk costs and forgiveness. I think those two aspects are very important, because on one side we have a bunch of people who have done things like cut off all relationships with friends and family, people who've made absolute fools of themselves in many different ways, people who've actually harmed people. Like, for instance, let's to take an example out of a hat, you have a bomber guy who ran a kind of a H bomber guy who ran a campaign against me where he earned £350,000. Which went to the child mutilation charities Mermaids, which I don't think will last another year. I really don't. Those people, obviously, those people have made our lives pretty hard in the last few years. Is it going to be possible to forgive people? I mean, it's very exhausting to think of forgiving people on a case-by-case basis because there were so many of them. But
people have to be sorry, first of all, to forgive them. Sometimes people want to forgive people who were never sorry, who never expressed any regret or remorse in the first place. So that's the first thing, is that a lot like H bomber guy's never going to come forward, he's never going to issue an apology for throwing hundreds of thousands of dollars at a child mutilation charity and for attacking the people who are criticizing it and raising the alarm.
And he will to himself, he will say, well, at the time I thought it was the right thing to do, and a lot of people will say that. I think there are some key people. I don't think anyone can even begin to trust Starmer until he addresses the change. He can't suddenly say, well, of course a woman is an adult female, and pretend that everything that had gone before hadn't gone before. He has to address it before anyone can even begin to trust him. And even then, there are loads of women, absolutely, and quite rightly so, who will probably never forgive him or even the Labour Party, that have been wounds. Some wounds are too deep for some people. But there are some key people who really, really need to actually show that they have, legitimately changed their position, even if he hasn't changed his mind. I mean, you can't force people to believe something that they don't believe, although, as the default position, he's probably always believed that actually a woman is a woman, and he has done what he feels was expedient as a politician. I don't care. But he does have to address it, I think. So there is that before anything else.
He's kind of, I mean, it's kind of unfortunate in one way. It's fortunate in one way and unfortunate in another that there's an election imminent, over the next year, because it's obviously done because of that. However, the example of the Labour Party, even if it's been forced, might be a good one for other people to see and other people to take up. Starmer, even though I don't think I could vote for Starmer after, or Nandy or anyone who supported this ideology, I don't think I could ever vote for him, because for me, it just shows you're too weak-willed to be a leader. If you're believing idiot members of staff who are telling you that, no, it's true. If you cut your cock off, you're a woman. then you can't really trust them on anything else.
No.
But,
no, it's odd, isn't it? That sorry, Graham, just as in there, it is odd that instead of looking at national polling for these things, they seem to have trusted a handful of activists in the party, which I think is a lesson that they have to learn, that they are not just the Labour Party for some activists, they're the Labour Party for Britain, for Christ's sake. You've got to do national polling. You've got to take the temperature of the whole of the country, not just who has your year.
And also, it's like there's a deeper flaw in the Labour Party, which is a contempt for people who aren't in a certain kind of bubble in London. It's like a contempt. It's the same kind of contempt that lost them safe seats they've had for 30 or 40 years in the north. They just someone pointed out, actually it was Venice Allen, she pointed out that today's hilarious tweet by Sadiq Khan saying, I'm very concerned that train strikes will mean that people can't get to Brighton to pretend to be gay for the Pride March, and it's like no mention of the fact that there's going to be a week-long strike coming up that's being promoted, but very, very worried about
straight people not being able to get to Brighton for Pride.
Yeah, exactly. So so like the one thing that as I say, I don't think I could vote for Keir Starmer again, but one thing that would impress me on his way out the door is if he undoes a little bit of the damage that's been done by the Labour Party in all this. Well, the Labour Party were driving this. A lot of they were driving this. They weren't just saying, they weren't just kind of going along. They were really pushing for it.
But that drive, that push, that comes from Labour's failure to recognize that there's been a zeitgeist shift in culture and society. I thought it was reflected really well. I think we talked about this in the last episode when some guy was arguing with Richard Dawkins that every single civil rights movement in the past has always been right. Therefore, we don't need to look any further. If somebody's raised transactivism as the new civil rights issue, we know it's right. So we can go ahead and just push it forward because we know it's the future. And I think Labour thought that they were at the avant-garde because they just fell into that model of thinking. And in the past, there have been times where polling was behind the times. I think always of Loving v. Virginia, when interracial marriage laws that banned interracial marriage in the United States were tremendously popular, and progressive politicians had to push to legalize interracial marriage, even though about 80% of Americans disapproved of it. And I think Labour probably thought they were being like that. They were ignoring everyone outside of the London bubble because they thought they could see the future. They thought they could see that this was the new civil rights movement. What they couldn't figure out was how easy it is to game that thinking. How easy it is to game that thinking. Once even the most basic normie person figured out that the civil rights movement is usually right, that means your basic normie bad actors can also see that, and they're going to position themselves, to take advantage of that. And I think that you see that a lot with very mainstream people adopting the word queer and adopting trans women or women. These are kind of normies who've never really been involved in gay politics and gay rights activism, never really knew anything about gender nonconformity or radical feminism, who suddenly embraced all of these slogans and mantras because they've just gone super mainstream, and they don't realize that the second these kinds of politics go super mainstream, it means that that's so mainstream that boring normal people can embrace them. That means they're also mainstream enough that charlatans can take advantage of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I compare it to in the 90s when the grunge movement went mainstream. That's exactly when it also became horrible and corporate and not anti-establishment anymore. When gay rights went mainstream is the exact moment when gay rights went pro-straight people.
Yes, exactly. I was thinking about this just the other day because I may have said this to you before, but I always think of this as a youth movement without any art. It's a youth movement that didn't
music.
Or music. I mean, you look at tribalism in terms of the history of tribalism in music. I think it's a pretty good history, maybe apart from the mods and the rockers flare-ups. But since then, it's pretty good, I think. You know, you get a bunch of people who like dressing, for instance, goths, who like dressing in black and paint their faces white and listening to music that sounds like it's been recorded in a prison shower. And they don't trouble anyone. But whenever they hear their tribe mentioned, their hearts flutter, because it's their thing, you know.
Like
and unfortunately,
that's sweet. That's nice.
No, it is sweet unless it's unmoored from art and culture, and this youth movement attached itself to a bunch of fucking lunatics like Judith Butler. You know,
well, it's a hospital now. You know, goths went to goth clubs.
Yeah.
Trans kids go to surgery rooms. I'm not even kidding. You know.
No, you're not. I know you're not.
Your child. You're taking
the
hospital.
But just to finish my point, like all these like when you could say goth, and you mentioned grunge. When that sells out, it doesn't have much of an effect beyond we have some bad music. But when the very idea of equality sells out, that's really dangerous, you know, because now people might look at things like, you know, anti-racism or anti-homophobia or anti you know, whatever other antis there are, all the antis, and they might say, well, that stuff's a bit tired and worn out.
Oh yeah,
and it resulted in a lot of harm. So it's kind of like, you know, we really have to try and make people distinguish between, you know, EDI, right, and real justice and real civil rights, you know.
Oh yeah, the backlash is going to throw the baby out with the bathwater if we don't be careful.
Because the
critical race theory is such a wild thing.
Yeah.
But people think that being anti-racist is now bad because they associate anything to do with combating racism with the absurdity of critical race theory. And people are starting to associate anything to do with gay rights with the queer movement and transactivism and gender identity ideology. And we're seeing a massive backlash against feminism. That feminism somehow, Matt Walsh, right-wing flaming asshole, you know, who said that feminists are to blame for gender identity ideology. Like, this is that sort of, we have to separate the baby from the bathwater. Yep. Gay rights activism is fine. Anti-racism is fine. Feminism is fine. These are perfectly good movements. There are just elements within them that have gone too far, you know.
But
I really don't think that's true with feminism.
No, it's true. But, no, because I was thinking about the same thing, you know, because we've often talked about the backlash against the gay movement with this, but I think transactivism has done much more than that. Exactly as you were saying, Artie, any movement for sort of minorities now is kind of tarred with that unpleasant brush, you know, and it is difficult for people to distinguish. So, you know, they might well just say, oh, well, it's all just rubbish. It's all ridiculous. And there is a backlash. And honestly, transactivism has such a lot to answer for. It's huge. It's really tainted a massive amount of good work and goodwill and good spirit. You know, it really has.
I've seen people so mad at gender ideology that they become climate deniers. And I'm not even kidding. It's sort of like they're sick of the left in general. They're sick of anything that looks progressive. They're like, fuck it. You know, I'm like a reactionary conservative now. And it's like, okay.
No, it's but sorry, Helen, what were you going to say?
Well, no, I mean, it goes back to, you know, what you sort of started this bit about sort of forgiveness and forgetting. You know, that there is something huge to be said here about never forgetting. We really have to try and unpick how this actually happened. You know, as Artie has pointed out many times before, we have it all documented now. You know, even here on the mess, you know, we've been talking about it for you know, a couple of years or so. It is documented everywhere on the internet. It's an incredibly important thing for historians to unpick. How did this happen? How did it get so far that kids were getting mutilated? Kids were getting surgery. We were telling kids lies that they can be somebody else, somebody they're not, and pretending that this was all fine. And it's happened like now in front of our eyes. It's an incredibly important thing to unpick and work out how it happens to try and prevent this sort of thing happening again.
Well, I used to always talk about, I had my Beatles theory of the internet. which I may have mentioned to you before. When Twitter started off, and I was still kind of in love with the fact that we had developed this kind of extraordinary communication device that could put two activists in different countries in touch with each other, and I thought, wow, imagine the great things, great art that will result, because now Paul McCartney and John Lennon don't have to be born in the same part of Liverpool to meet each other. They could be born anywhere in the world. I thought it was all going to be great. But what actually happened is that the worst people in the world started coordinating online. And it was more like Jimmy Savile, right? And Fred West and all these like mini versions of these people, the BTK killer and all these types. They were suddenly able to coordinate and develop a kind of a uniformity of messaging that was almost as powerful as the political parties, or in fact more powerful. It's transformed the world, and it's transformed the world so much for the worse that we really have to think about how to undo it all, So, and one of the things I thought was the Holocaust could not be possible in a connected world. That's what I thought. And instead what happened was that, just like when you put a CCTV camera up in a crime area, crime goes down. But after a while, everyone goes, fuck it. And it just goes back up again to the same levels, And that's what the internet's been like. The cameras have been on all over the world all the time. And absolute atrocities have been carried out in full view of everyone, with people not only, it's like taking selfies of their mutilated bodies, smiling with their doctors, and we've all just looked at it and just thought, well, no, not us, obviously, not us or anyone watching this show, but everyone just looked at it and thought, oh yeah, that's fair enough. Cutting your breasts off, yeah, that makes total sense. And so instead of the panopticon giving us a better world, it's given us a far worse world, where atrocities are normalized. All I'm saying here is that if the conversation is going to be a serious conversation, we have to talk about how the internet has changed us.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair. I mean, dark, but fair.
Some kids have grown up with it, and they don't realize that the world used to be different. That there was, So yes. But
look what's happened. There has been a cohort of people who have not allowed it to happen. We've been, all of us here, all of us on Twitter, all of us in the comments, so the Women's Rights Network, everyone has said, no, we're not allowing it. We're not allowing it to happen. And we have pushed and we've pushed and we've pushed and we've pushed and we've lost things and we've had bad things happen to us and we've had people calling us all sorts of names and we have persevered. And we all ought to be extraordinarily proud of ourselves for doing so in the face of overwhelming sort of like a fierceness. And we are turning the tide. I definitely feel that we're turning the tide. Like I've said again, we're certainly not there yet. There's a lot of work to do, but we are turning the tide. And that's incredibly important.
Yeah. By the way, I'm not going to do any of that work. I'm a comedy writer. I want to get back to writing comedy. I think I've done enough in the last 6 years. I'm gonna take a break from it as soon as I can, as soon as it seems like things are getting back on the right track. And I'm sure that people would rather I was doing comedy than saying the same things every week about this stuff,
Well, it's felt like this boulder we've been trying to push up this hill and push and push and push. And now it's rolling. Now it's just rolling ahead of us.
Can we just give a quick shout out to all the people within Labour who've helped to bring this situation about? Labour Women's Declaration, Rosie Duffield. I'm not anyone else. Anyone else?
Tonya Zanatti, the Gower Labour MP. She's spoken out. One of the very few Labour women MPs or the Labour MPs who have. Let's see if Labour want to be taking it all seriously. The first thing they should do, I think, is make Rosie Duffield Shadow Minister for Women, if there is a position. I don't know if they've changed it to Shadow Minister for Gender, but they should reinvent Shadow Minister for Women and put her in the post. And all of the women's rights groups, WP UK, fair play for women, everyone who's made a contribution. And, and again, we're certainly not there yet. But I do think that we, part of this whole war has been a war of propaganda. And I think the more of us who believe that that the tide has turned, the more the tide will turn. Because, because a lot of it is other people believing that the tide has turned and the believing that they are now able to speak. And in fact, a lot of people are going to want to speak because they are not going to want to be left behind. They're not going to want to be one of the last ones who are still holding on to this. If they're seeing the tide turning, if they're thinking that the tide is turning, that they're going to actually jump on board. It's actually quite important for us, I think, to celebrate this, what I feel is a huge win in terms of, Labour ipso. It's a change. And the more of us that believe it, I think the more of us, it will actually, it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. And there's a kind of a personal thing for me too. When this finally starts to turn in Canada, I feel like I'll feel some redemption. I've been criticized so harshly by so many people, and I've had to pay such a personal cost for speaking out about this. I want to feel a little bit of redemption. I want to feel that some of these people who criticize me are now in line with me and see that I was right all along. I've not been feeling that way because it's hurt. It's hurt a lot being constantly told that I'm wrong and that I'm a fool and I deserve this and that and the other thing because I've spoken out about this. It's gonna feel good when people turn around and go, I get what you were doing, Artie. You did good work and you shouldn't have been treated that way. It would be nice to get an apology or two. I'm not going to lie, Well,
the only apology I want is to get my fucking musical made by the cowards of Hattrick who sat on it for years, when it's ready to go.
Have you got back to them recently? Now, can you go back to them now and say, look, this is the Labour Party's position?
No, there's something coming up soon that they won't be able to ignore. I'll say that much. But no, I haven't got back to them because they kind of just cut off all contact.
My guess is that this will get made. My guess is that it'll happen.
Who knows? I mean, if the theaters are still kind of captured by their idiot staff, idiot woke staff, then let's put it on fucking school hall. Like it's a absolute kind of. Again, it's just more like I noticed today. They're putting warnings on Raymond Chandler books. So we still have a problem. We still have a problem of these individual activists within organizations. They're the people who hide books in Waterstones. They're the people at the old Vic who put in fucking gender neutral toilets and stop. Terry Gilliam from having a musical put on in London. These people are unfortunately still there, and they just true. They need to be dealt with by the grown-ups. The grown-ups need to say, no, you were absolutely wrong. You were supporting atrocities. You were supporting atrocities, and you silence people who are trying to speak up about it. And that goes for you, Jimmy Mulville. I don't know if he probably won't be watching this, but he will have to address it soon. But
I did wonder about the great masses of the young people, the ushers, the usher class, the arts supporters,
the ice cream sellers.
The what? Sorry?
The ice cream sellers.
The ice cream sellers who are holding everyone hostage. With
suddenly had enough power to cancel a Terry Gilliam musical in London. You know what I mean? Sell the fucking ice cream and shut the fuck up.
Exactly. I don't think. I mean, I think once the management learns that those young people don't have actually any grounds to be complaining the way that they do. I think they'll be silenced pretty quickly,
Yeah.
It's really devastating how the whole arts sector is ruined and destroyed, though. It's just absolutely devastating. So it might take a few years, but certainly the big organizations, I can imagine in 2 years, I don't think you would have any trouble mounting a Father's Head at a giant West End theater, Right now, no. Too many ice cream sellers in the way. But in 2 years, I don't think it'll be a problem.
These people, but the people that you're talking about, the activists, they only have power as long as everyone believes they have power. You know,
Yes,
it's
exactly.
a charade. It's a house of cards.
And
that card, that bottom, you know, those couple of bottom cards have been pulled out from under them. It's not going to be long before, the power differential has now shifted. Like the Labour Party has taken a lot of the wind out of that sail. They just have. And so, it'll start to go. I mean, obviously these things, like a tanker, somebody was saying on Twitter, it's the tanker analogy, isn't it? It takes a long time to come to a halt. And even then it's really hard to turn it around because it's slow, but it will.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I just shared there a quote from someone saying that TERFs in the theatre are scared to speak out. I can't promise that they won't get a hard time if they do speak out, but now's the time, and it's like, I heard the other day a wonderful thing that, oh my God, it just made my week. We had this thing a few years ago, the GC Coming Out Day, and it was kind of undermined by various groups of people on both sides, But I found out that the organization ICON, which I think is an Australian organization, the person who formed that was inspired by the GC Coming Out Day, and apparently now there's something like 100. I don't know what it was she said. I can't remember what it was she said, but like she basically inspired 100 people, I think it was sports figures, to come and start defending women's sports because of that day, So you don't really know what you'll do until you do it. You know what I mean? You don't really know how successful you'll be until you do it. And you do have to take a step. And one thing I will say is that if your employers come at you for something that you do along those lines, then it'll be a news story. You'll be able to completely destroy your employers in court or in the press, So do take a little bit of confidence from that. There's a lot of hunger now for these stories as well. I noticed someone in the civil service today was targeted. And again, it's like a time story, It's not going unnoticed the way it used to. They thought, for instance, they could beat Rachel Mead up in the dark, another social worker. They didn't think there'd be attention drawn to it, but tons of attention. And Rachel just slaughtered them in court. So, it may not be the type of thing that's actually one thing that might be putting you off, is that you might think, oh no, my life is going to be engulfed by this for the next 2 or 3 years. I don't think so. I think people like Rachel Mead, God bless her, they took on the fight so you wouldn't have to, And again, if one person speaks up, I just think you'll be surprised at how many other people agree with you, So, but yeah, I can't say, but it's hard for me to say that. And I wouldn't like to say, you do have to be safe still. You have to take care of yourself, your ability to make a living.
But more and more people are sort of seeing it, aren't they? And employers are seeing it. We had, there was the Stonewall interview on Sky. Was it Beth Rigby? And what was his name? Ian Anderson, was it? He came over badly. Great. I mean, he came over badly. He came over as somebody who had no idea what to say to any of the charges.
That's why the policy was
any of the questions.
That's why the policy was no debate, because there is no answer to these questions. It is. But this was mainstream. Wrong.
People saw this.
Yes.
Thousands of people saw this, and you've got who was it yesterday? Andrew Neil saying,
"Yes,
what have we done? What have we done to these children? I'm ashamed of us." And obviously, there was a lot of people saying, "Well, we've been here. Where have you been?" But nevertheless, he's woken up and he's like, okay, he's obviously thinking, I don't want to be last. I don't want to be last here. This is the first wave of the second lot of people, and and the more people who speak out, the more people, like I quite rudely said on Twitter yesterday, more and more people are finally pointing at the emperor and saying, look, he's had his cock out for the last decade.
Yeah. And he's been masturbating.
Taking that one step further.
Yeah. The rubble for this is some of it is going to be hard to physically rebuild. I'm thinking about Like there was a queer theater in Toronto that closed for an entire season and got all this government funding, and they spent all of it taking apart their wonderful male and female washrooms and turning them into a giant unisex washroom with the least amount of privacy possible, with like stalls that had like huge gaps in the floors, and just making everything as utterly uncomfortable for everyone as possible. And they spent like an astronomical fortune deliberately doing this, and it just felt like just an autogynephile's fantasy come to life, you know? It was just so ridiculous. They're going to have to dismantle that eventually. They're going to have to go, oh, crap. We spent all this government funding. We shut down for an entire year to get rid of comfortable washrooms and safe washrooms for women. I think we have to put them back now. What do we do? Schools have been doing that. You know, the summer break ends, kids come back to school, all the washrooms have been dismantled and rebuilt, and now it's just a unisex washroom. That's all going to have to be put back the way it was. That's going to take a lot of people going, oh crap, we spent a lot of money in the wrong direction.
Well, yes,
we have to literally, you know.
And in the meantime, you know, some of these poor kids, some of these girls, that's how they're going to live the next 3 years at school, is uncomfortable. You know, uncomfortable, and sometimes not even going to school if they're on their period, because they simply just don't want to do it. You know, there's huge repercussions to all of this, huge. And as you say, Graham, some people just can't be forgiven. You know, some of these.
I want firings. I'm not beneath that either.
Yeah,
if you ordered a unisex bathroom into a high school just to be like to do that much harm to the female pupils, you should be fired. You know,
that's
not just a waste of money and time. You did harm to girls' education. Like you're fired. You know,
Yes. Very, very true. Very true. Send Stonewall the bill for all this crap. That's a good idea. That's a good idea.
Yes. Well, they've got a lot of money, haven't they?
Well, the Guardian do too. I found out this week that Kath Viner gets £500,000 a year, and they're still begging for money. You know, very interesting that was. Apparently, huge profits this year for the Guardian. There was something else I want to say. Yeah, on Andrew Neil. If anyone has his ear, tell him to unblock. Ask him if he'll unblock me, because I used to be a real, you know, in my old pre unblinkered days. No, pre-blinkered. Oh no. You know what I mean. When I was a firebrand, when I was a left-wing firebrand, I used to really be angry at him because I thought he was a climate change denier. You know, so I was getting at him all the time, and finally he got sick of me and blocked me. So ask him to unblock me and tell him I'm sorry. You know, I was an arsehole. I was an arsehole in the old days. You know, before all this happened, because I was listening to the same people who convinced everybody else that. That some of this insanity is true, you know, you know.
Okay, I love. I mean, you know, I haven't got his ear, but I will. I'll tweet him amongst all the other hundreds of people tweeting him.
Yes, that'll definitely do it.
That'll definitely do it.
Yeah, but it's been nice. It's been nice seeing many people, and thank you anyone who's watching this who did it. But it's been nice seeing so many people mention my name in talking to him and saying, you know, that I was early in it and stuff like that. It's all very nice to see. And speaking of another thing, just to say, I was in Dublin this weekend with my kids, and I had 2 people come up to me and thank me, not for Father Ted, but for the mess we're in, which is the first.
So sweet.
I think one of them might be in this group. He said the painter who said hello in Dublin. He might say hello, you know, which was a lovely thing for my kids to hear. And it was just brilliant.
That is nice. That is nice. Actually, it is nice that your kids got to hear that. That is lovely. That happened to me a couple of times in Wales as well. And I thought that was nice. You know, my kids were like, "Oh my God, now he's been recognised in a charity shop in Carmarthen."
Yeah. I also had
even out here in Canada. I mean, there's a lot more viewership in the UK and Ireland, but I've been stopped. You know, somebody recognized me a few weeks ago on the street, and she said that you know, she supports me and she thought I was doing good work.
Well, that's nice.
Really tough to me too. Yeah.
And at some point, when somebody says, "Oh, are you on the mess we're in?" I won't think, "Oh shit." You know, at some point I'd be like, Yeah, you know, they're
Yeah.
my default position is that they'll be stopping me because they're happy, as opposed to they're stopping me because they want to call me a bigot.
Well, I did have two other people though who didn't like me. One shouted "turf" at me on the street, but I take
And you're
that.
like,
I take that. Well, I take that as my third good review of the weekend. You know, I shouted back, "Proud of it, mate. Proud of it." And the last one, I don't know. I felt a bit sorry for the last one. He just seemed a bit kind of confused by the experience of meeting me, because I said to him, "You supported mermaids. You supported Tavistock. You were responsible for the mutilation of children." You know, and gosh, it was satisfying saying that to one of these guys' faces. You know, somebody who thinks they have moral superiority over me, and you supported the mutilation of children. I don't think so, Pat. Another nice message here.
that is so sweet. Thank you.
I like the fact that I'm earning this money for when people do this. I feel a bit terrible that it's. Maybe we should get together and we should share it out at some point.
Well, you did buy us dinner. You did buy us dinner the other day.
Like bank robbers after a take.
Yeah.
After.
I have to say, no. I think it's important to say to everyone. I'm blown away by how much money we've been given today. That's astonishing. We're not in this for the money, but it's extremely sweet. It's extremely nice that people are prepared to do this. Well, obviously, I've got a job. You haven't.
Well, maybe we should.
I don't have a job, so yeah,
that's true.
Yeah.
So
that's not why we started it.
Or subscribe to my Substack because I am unemployed and I do the money.
Yeah, but that's not why we. But that's not why we're speaking out. That's incidental. Yeah. That's not why we're speaking out.
Well, yeah. If it was, boy, it's not that much money.
No, it's like I'm not making money in this.
It's not very profitable.
I've spent my life savings on this, trying to fight this.
I have a joke.
Literally.
I have a joke I want to do for my stand-up, which is when I go from one gag to another, I want to say I was gonna write a transition to this gag, but the amount of money I'm being paid for this evening is so infinitesimally small compared to what I made when I was writing Father Ted, that every time I tried, I burst into tears. You know.
Well, it is actually quite funny, but it is very sad. But anyway, I don't want to end on that note. What I want to end on is that the tide it is a turning. I absolutely believe this. There's no question in my mind now that things are changing. This is absolutely the beginning of the middle.
The beginning of the middle. Oh my God. Okay, I can't keep up with which beginning and which middle we're at. I don't want to think about that anymore. I think basically let's welcome people who seem genuine. Let's accept apologies that seem genuine, but let's not let anyone away with anything. You know, there are apologies to be made. You know, you destroyed people's lives. You know, and
yes, but Starmer needs to start by just apologizing to Rosie Duffield.
Yes, that would be a great start. And
I think there's a lot of emotion. You know, there's a lot of people who are upset and angry about what's gone on. So as we're moving into this new phase, I mean, you know,
you're moving into a new phase.
Gracious to people who are coming into it, but we can't just get angry. We can't try to stop the emotions from happening because they're there, you know. Yeah. But let's try to be gracious to people as they come in. But you know, we all understand that it's a it's been a difficult fight, and there's a lot of tension to be relieved. You know,
indeed,
absolutely. Yes. Well, that's a good place to end it. I think we've done a good 53 minutes.
Yes, so lovely as usual to read the comments. Some excellent comments. Some lovely people.
Yeah, and let's not let down our guard. Still a long way to go.
No, you're right.
And also, Labour Party could be lying. That's the other thing. We have to make sure they're actually telling the truth. We have to hear what they actually propose to do about the situation. So on that note, thank you very much, everyone. Wonderful mess. I think I really enjoyed that. Oh, yeah. We will do one soon with Vashti. I've forgotten her second name.
Vaishnavi
Sundar, yes, who's doing a documentary on trans widows, and I've been meaning to get her on for ages. We haven't done that, so we'll do one soon and get her on for a chat as well. All right, everyone, thank you very much.
Right.
See you soon.
Bye. Thanks so much. Yay.